Hello, friends. If you're curious about the movie Snow White 2025, you're in the perfect place. Don't forget to give this video a quick like, it really helps us out. And if you're new here, hit subscribe to stay updated on all the latest movie deep dives. Let's jump right in. There's something old stirring again, something from the deep marrow of our collective memory, a tale whispered through generations, painted in shadows and light. But this time, it's not the story you think you know. The kingdom still has its looming castle, its poisoned apple, and a queen who speaks to mirrors. But within these familiar bones, a new heart beats, wilder, braver, and entirely unwilling to be silenced. This version isn't content to glide on nostalgia or rest in the safety of archetypes. Instead, it sinks its hands deep into the mythos and pulls forth a story that breathes, blood-warm, breath-soft, fierce in its defiance. It is a story not only about beauty but about the power to define it. Not merely a conflict between good and evil, but a reckoning between legacy and choice. The world we step into is no dainty fairy tale. The kingdom is breathtaking, yes, but beautiful in the way a frozen lake is beautiful, with danger cracking just beneath the surface. Snow drifts through alleyways like ghostly confetti. The palace glistens not with warmth but with polish, each gleam carefully curated by a ruler whose obsession with control has rendered everything brittle. The queen does not simply demand admiration. She devours it, clinging to her ageless perfection like a lifeline. Her presence is magnetic, her gaze venomous. When she enters a room, air seems to vanish. Mirrors line the corridors, not as decor, but as surveillance. And they all answer to her. And then there is the girl. Not yet a rebel, not yet a legend. Just a name that carries too much weight. She is not raised to rule but raised to obey, kept hidden like an antique no longer wanted but too valuable to discard. Her beauty is quiet, accidental, and infuriating to the queen because it is untouched by artifice. She moves through the halls like a shadow, absorbing everything. Her eyes do not sparkle with naivety, they flicker with recognition. She sees the cracks in the marble, the rot behind the perfumes. She doesn't speak much, but when she does, her voice lands like a dropped stone in still water. The moment of exile doesn't come suddenly. It's brewed over time, like poison prepared drop by drop. The queen, growing restless, consults the mirror with increasing desperation. And the answer, unchanging, unflinching, drives her to finality. A hunt is ordered. The girl is taken into the woods by a man who is supposed to end her story with a knife. But stories, especially the true ones, do not end so easily. The forest has other plans. The woods are not kind, but they are honest. Here, the trees lean closer. Paths shift underfoot. Light flickers with secrets. And in this wildness, something long dormant begins to awaken. The girl does not merely survive, she transforms. She is bruised. She is bleeding. But she is alive, and in that aliveness, a fire takes root. She stumbles upon those who have also been cast aside. Strange, broken, brilliant souls who live in a pocket of the forest the queen's reach cannot touch. They do not trust her at first. Why should they? But in her, they recognize something familiar, a wound shaped like the world's cruelty. And in them, she finds more than shelter. She finds mirrors that reflect something truer than beauty. They see her. They follow her not because of what she is, but because of what she chooses to become. And all the while, the queen feels it. Like a splinter in her skin. She knows the girl still breathes, and that is a threat she cannot ignore. Her magic grows darker, wilder. The mirror's voice cracks. Her illusions flicker. And so she does what all tyrants do when fear outpaces reason. She creates a new spell. This one not to kill, but to erase. To still time. To bury fire in ice. The poisoned apple isn't a trick, it's a challenge. The girl is offered rest, peace, a way out of pain. She takes the bite not out of weakness, but defiance. Because sometimes survival looks like surrender. The world stills. Her body lies in a glass coffin beneath the whispering trees. But her story does not stop. And neither does the forest. It watches, waits, carries her breath in its branches. And then someone arrives, not a prince, but a witness. A soul who doesn't try to awaken her with force or fate, but who simply sees her. The moment she breathes again is not triumphant. It is quiet, sacred. The spell breaks not with a kiss, but with recognition. And now she rises. Not to take the throne, not to slay the queen, but to return with her truth intact. She walks into the palace with fire in her eyes and frost on her cloak. She speaks not in fury, but with the weight of everything she has endured. The queen, no longer invincible, watches her approach and sees what the mirror always knew. Beauty is not power. Integrity is. The final confrontation does not explode. It implodes. The queen crumbles beneath the truth of her own reflection. The girl does not strike her down. She leaves her to face herself. The palace begins to fracture, not in stone, but in silence. For the first time, its halls echo with something new, freedom. The story doesn't end with a coronation. It ends with a return to the forest. A seed planted. A cloak shed. A girl walking barefoot, no longer chaste, no longer hidden. She is not the fairest. She is not the chosen. She is simply herself. And that is more than enough. What makes this retelling unforgettable isn't the grandeur of its world, but the honesty of its reinvention. The filmmakers have taken a tale that once belonged to the glassy-eyed gaze of passive heroines and shattered it. In its place, they have woven a version that pulses with agency, with scars, with the beauty of a girl who refuses to become anyone's symbol. The performances hum with nuance. The queen simmers, unraveling slowly like silk burned at the edges. The girl never once plays to the crowd. Her power isn't in her smile, it's in her stillness. Even the forest feels alive, with cinematography that turns every branch and flicker of light into a verse of poetry. The sound design doesn't scream. It whispers, reminding you that magic isn't about what you see, it's about what you feel. And then, of course, there are the twists yet to be revealed. The apple, yes, but not just one. A face in the mirror that doesn't belong. A companion whose past may not be as buried as it seems. And an ending that doesn't close the story, but opens a path. Because in this tale, the most powerful magic isn't cast with spells. It's made with choice. It begins in silence. Not the kind that soothes, but the kind that waits. A silence that hangs in the corridors of the palace like fog, cold and uninviting, where whispers are more common than laughter and light rarely touches the ground. Here, beauty is curated, not celebrated. Order is law, and appearances are everything. The queen, ever glorious, walks through her kingdom like a blade dressed in silk. Her throne room is a shrine to control. Mirrors line the walls like eyes that never blink, always watching, always judging. And behind the opulence, in the dimmest corner of the court, a girl lives like a secret. She is not raised to be seen. She is raised to be remembered quietly, if at all. Her footsteps echo differently in the stone halls, soft, unsure, careful. Not because she lacks courage, but because courage isn't welcomed here. Her name carries history, too much of it, and history is dangerous when it threatens to outshine the present. She is not pampered. She is not praised. She is tolerated. Yet even the quietest flame cannot go unnoticed forever. The queen, haunted by whispers and worn down by the demands of her own perfection, begins to feel the air shift. There are rumors. The girl is growing, and with her, so is something the queen cannot stomach, admiration that is unbidden. It happens in fragments. A stable hand glances too long. A noblewoman lowers her voice when her name is spoken. The mirror, once a loyal reflection of reassurance, becomes colder. Its answers, vaguer, until, one day, it speaks with terrible clarity. "There is another." The Queen freezes. The weight of those 3 words settles in her bones like ice. The girl doesn't know it yet, but the story has begun to turn. And what follows is a series of seemingly small moments, each a pebble tumbling down a mountain, each carrying the inevitability of avalanche. The Queen doesn't rage. She plans. A feast is declared. Lavish. Loud. A distraction. Amid the gold-draped banquet tables and rose-drenched courtyards, a plan is set into motion. The girl is summoned, not asked, not invited. She is told to appear, dressed in white. A symbol of innocence. A symbol of surrender. The gown chokes her. She wears it anyway. That night, amid dancers and fireworks, the Queen watches her like a hawk. 1,000 eyes in the room, but only 2 matter. The girl feels them burn against her skin, and yet she doesn't shrink. She walks the perimeter of the celebration like an outsider. She doesn't laugh. She doesn't dance. But she sees everything, the way the Queen's fingers tighten around her wine glass, the flicker of fear behind her poise. And then comes the decree. The girl will leave the palace. Not as punishment. Not as exile. As a gesture of kindness, the Queen insists. She has lived too long in shadow. It is time for her to see the world. Accompanied, of course, by a loyal escort. A man chosen by the Queen herself, a huntsman with eyes like gravel and a mouth that speaks little. The girl senses the truth. But what choice does she have? The forest welcomes her not with warmth, but with warning. It stretches endlessly, ancient and primal. Trees bend unnaturally. Wind moves without sound. The deeper they walk, the more the world seems to change. The huntsman does not speak of his orders, but the silence between them grows heavy. Until, finally, the moment arrives. They stop at a clearing. The girl, by now, understands. She meets his gaze not with fear, but with a kind of weary defiance. If this is to be her end, she will not beg. She will not bow. But something in her stillness breaks him. He lowers the blade, breathes raggedly, tells her to run. She does. And with that, the story fractures. She flees not just from death, but from everything she has ever known. She runs until her feet bleed, until her lungs scream. And when she collapses, it is not in despair, it is in surrender to something new. The forest takes her in. The next chapter of her journey is not marked by grandeur. It is marked by survival. She is found by others. Not royalty. Not knights. But wanderers. Exiles. Broken people who have learned how to live where no one else dares. They do not trust her. She is a girl who smells of palace floors and perfumed betrayal. But she does not ask for trust. She asks for water, shelter, a chance. Over time, trust grows like moss, slow and soft and surprising. She learns their names, their stories. One speaks only in riddles. One hides behind a beard too large for his face. Another sings to the stars when he thinks no one listens. They teach her to cook without fire, to walk without leaving tracks. In return, she listens. She doesn't try to fix them. She honors them. And in that, they begin to follow her, not as a leader, but as something steadier. A presence. A firelight in the dark. Back in the palace, the Queen seethes. The mirror's silence becomes unbearable. The forest offers no word of success. The girl's death has not arrived. Her breath still lingers on the wind. And so, the Queen prepares something darker. A spell, old as sorrow, wrapped in fruit. But we're not there yet. Because in the forest, the girl is changing. Not into a warrior, not into a queen. into herself. She stops looking over her shoulder. She begins to walk upright. Her laugh returns, tentative at first, then full. She begins to dream again, not of escape, but of becoming. Her companions notice. One begins carving figures again. One sings louder. The forest, too, seems to shift. Where once it twisted against her, it now parts for her. But peace is always the calm before the story sharpens. One night, beneath the clearest sky she has seen in years, she dreams of a voice calling her name. Not the queen. Not her father. Her own voice, from somewhere far ahead, urging her forward. She wakes. And the apple is waiting. Dawn breaks differently now. Not with warmth, but with stillness. So still, the trees hold their breath. The girl lies motionless beneath a thick quilt of morning mist, her breath shallow, her skin kissed by the faintest hint of frost. Around her, the forest has gone quiet. Not out of fear, but reverence. As though the land itself understands the weight of what has just happened. The apple had been red. Too red. A crimson so perfect it seemed painted by deceit. It had appeared not with fanfare, but with a whisper, a gift from a stranger cloaked in kindness, their voice soft and trembling. A bite was all it took. One bite to freeze her mid-step, her fingers outstretched, her lips just parting in surprise. She fell without a sound. And the forest, once alive with song and story, fell with her. Her companions find her like that, crumpled in a patch of light. And in that moment, everything breaks. They do not wail. They do not rage. They kneel. They touch her hands. One weeps quietly. One stands watch with eyes like stone. Another places a flower at her side, the petals shaking in their palm. Time seems to dissolve. Days pass, though no one counts them. They build a resting place, not of marble or gold, but of glass and wood and moss. A coffin not for a princess, but for a soul who gave them names again. A soul who made them believe. And far away, the queen smiles. Her mirror is silent once more. Her kingdom settles into uneasy peace. The whispers cease. The threat is buried beneath branches and grief. A shadow that doesn't match the light. A doubt. The kind that gnaws at you not in daylight, but in dreams. In the forest, something stirs. Not a spell. Not a prince. A presence. A stranger, drawn by stories that carry on the wind, of a girl who burned brighter than the crown above her. He arrives quietly, without armor, without title. He asks no one for permission. He simply stands by the coffin and waits. His eyes do not widen in awe. They soften with something deeper. Recognition. He does not kiss her. He does not beg her to return. Instead, he speaks. Softly. Of a sister he lost. Of a song he once heard her hum on the edge of sleep. Of how this girl, lying silent, reminds him not of fairy tales, but of real things, hurt and hope and the space between them. He does not try to bring her back. He offers her something rarer, the choice to rise. And something in her stirs. Not dramatically. Slowly. Like frost melting. Like breath returning. Her fingers twitch. Eyes open, not with confusion, but clarity. She breathes in, sharp and full, and the world exhales with her. When she rises, she is not greeted by applause. Only silence. Only the sound of wind threading through the trees like a song returned. Her companions step back, not because they are afraid, but because they know what she has become is something none of them can define. She does not ask questions. She remembers everything. And now she knows what must be done. She does not storm the palace with armies. She does not don armor. Instead, she walks. Alone, at first. Then joined by the outcasts. Then by the villagers who watched her grow up behind guarded walls. Word spreads. not like wildfire, but like prayer. The girl walks. The queen watches. The moment they meet again is not loud. It is devastating in its quiet. The queen stands in her hall, robed in silver and shadow, every mirror polished, every servant dismissed. She expects a challenge. She expects defiance. But the girl gives her neither. She enters the room not like a conqueror, but like someone who has already won. They do not scream at each other. They speak. And what they say is not prophecy. It is memory, pain, truth. The girl tells the queen that fear does not justify cruelty, that beauty does not require sacrifice, that love cannot grow in a house of mirrors. And the queen, for one breathless moment, listens. Then she laughs. Not mockery. Despair. She admits it, everything. That she was once the girl too. That the mirror gave her power only because it fed on her hunger for approval. That every spell she cast was an attempt to preserve a version of herself she never truly believed in. She says it like a confession. Like a eulogy for the person she once hoped to be. And the girl steps closer. Offers her hand. Not in forgiveness. In finality. But the queen cannot take it. Because to let go would mean living without the armor. Without the reflection. She turns away, steps toward the mirror one last time, and it shatters before her hand touches it. 1,000 shards raining down around her. She falls to her knees. And she does not rise. The castle does not crumble. The sky does not darken. No dragons, no storms. Just a breath. A pause. A reign ended. The girl walks out alone. She does not claim the throne. She walks past it, through the corridors, down the steps, into the square. People gather, hesitant, unsure. She meets their eyes. Not to demand allegiance, but to offer something else, the truth. She speaks not of crowns or destiny. She speaks of stories, how they shape us, how they trap us, how they can be rewritten. She tells them she does not want to rule them. She wants to live among them. They do not cheer. They listen. And slowly, one by one, they begin to nod. The forest does not fade. It becomes a bridge. Between the palace and the people. Between legend and life. Seasons pass. She plants a garden near the edge of the woods. No walls. No guards. Just soil and seeds and sky. The companions remain. Some in the village, some in the trees. The stranger who witnessed her return visits often, not with gifts, but with songs. The queen's tower stands empty, the mirror room locked. No one has opened it since. Because no one needs to ask the mirror anymore. They know who they are. And the girl, once hunted, once hidden, lives not as the fairest of them all, but as the freest. She begins in the shadows. Not because she chooses to, but because the world has chosen it for her. Tucked away within the cold corridors of a palace that feels more like a prison than a home, the girl is less a person and more a presence, unspoken, unnamed, unseen by those who matter. She walks like someone used to holding their breath. Yet even in her silence, she radiates something the world cannot ignore. It isn't charm, or even defiance. It is truth. A quiet kind of knowing. And in a kingdom ruled by illusion, nothing is more dangerous than truth. Her journey is not marked by loud declarations or dazzling feats. It's defined by small choices. By the refusal to become what others expect her to be. From the beginning, she is watched. By a mirror, by a queen, by a world that only values what it can control. And yet, she watches back. She notices the cracks in the walls. The hollowness in the laughter. The loneliness behind the queen's perfect smile. She sees, and in seeing, she begins to understand. The girl doesn't start as a heroine. She starts as a witness. But what makes her transformation so compelling is not the magnitude of change, It's the precision of it. She doesn't evolve through fate. She evolves through choice. When she runs into the forest, it isn't just escape. It's a step toward becoming. She doesn't pick up a sword. She picks up her breath. She doesn't fight with force. She survives with stillness. She listens, learns, waits, and slowly, the wild becomes her mirror, not reflecting what she is, but what she could be. And when the moment finally comes, when she stands again before the woman who sought to erase her, she doesn't meet her with rage. She meets her with something far more terrifying. Clarity. Because she no longer questions her worth. She no longer asks the mirror to speak. She knows. And in that knowing, she becomes unshakable. Not invincible, but whole. She is not crowned by anyone. She doesn't need to be. She wears no title. But her presence becomes the kind that draws people closer without force. The kind that leads not through command, but through conviction. In the center of this world, the queen burns like a dying star. Beautiful, yes. Mesmerizing. But also brittle. Sharp. Tragic. She is not just a villain. She is the embodiment of a fear that eats from within. The fear of being forgotten. The terror of irrelevance. From the moment she first gazes into the mirror and hears the name of another, her world begins to unravel. Not because she has been dethroned, but because she has been seen. And the queen cannot bear to be seen unless she controls the gaze. Her obsession with beauty is not vanity. It is survival. The mirrors that surround her are not trophies. They are cages. She uses spells not to conquer others, but to silence her own reflection. Each enchantment is an attempt to rewind time. Each cruelty, a desperate act of preservation. She doesn't want power. She wants proof that she still matters, that her face still holds dominion over fate. But mirrors lie. And when hers begins to falter, so does she. What makes her fall so tragic is not the grandeur of it, it's the intimacy. Her descent is not thunderous. It is quiet, fragile, like silk unraveling at the edges. There are moments when she almost breaks free, when a flicker of softness passes across her face, when she watches the girl not with hatred, but with recognition. But the spell of fear is too strong. She can't let go of what she was long enough to become something new. And so, she remains frozen in a palace that no longer loves her. Until she breaks. Then there are the others. The outcasts. The forgotten. The misnamed. They live on the edge of the world, not because they chose exile, but because the world refused to hold space for their truth. Each of them carries a history. A scar. A silence. And yet, none of them have turned bitter. They joke. They cook. They watch the stars. When the girl arrives, they don't rush to save her. They ask her to sit, to listen, to be. And in that quiet welcome, they offer something deeper than rescue. They offer her the chance to be real. Among them, she is not the fairest. She is the most human. They do not need her to lead. They follow her because she reminds them that softness and strength are not opposites. That survival does not require cruelty. They change her, yes. But she changes them too. She reminds them of something they had almost forgotten. Hope. There is one among them who never speaks. Or speaks only when no one is listening. His name is barely said aloud. He watches her with eyes that seem older than the trees. And when she breaks, when the apple takes her breath away, it is he who stands the longest by her side. He doesn't weep. He waits. And when she wakes, he does not bow. He simply says, "You came back." And there is the one who arrives late. Not a savior. Not a prince. Just a man with a memory. He does not try to fix her. He does not claim her story. He sits beside her, and in doing so, gives her something no spell could offer, a moment to be seen for who she is, not what she represents. His role is small, quiet, but essential. Because sometimes, all it takes is one witness to remind you that you are still alive. Together, these characters form a constellation. Not perfect, not powerful in the traditional sense, but true. Each one mirrors a part of the girl's journey. Each one reflects what the queen could have been, the child she once was, the woman she never allowed herself to become. And in the end, that's what makes this story so resonant. It's not about who wins. It's about who chooses to grow. Because in a world obsessed with reflection, the bravest thing anyone can do is step away from the mirror and into the light. It began with a fire. Not metaphorical, but real, flames licking the edges of a set still under construction at Pinewood Studios. March 15, 2022. A tree, part of the elaborate forest backdrop, caught fire, leading to a blaze that halted production before it truly began. No filming was underway, and thankfully, no one was hurt. But the incident cast an early shadow over the film's journey, a harbinger of the challenges to come. Then came the dwarfs, or rather, the absence of them. Disney's decision to use CGI for the 7 dwarfs, instead of casting actors with dwarfism, sparked controversy. Peter Dinklage criticized the move, calling it a step backward. In response, Disney stated they were reimagining the characters to avoid reinforcing stereotypes. Yet, this choice led to backlash from actors within the dwarfism community, who felt opportunities were being taken away from them. Rachel Zegler, cast as Snow White, found herself at the center of another storm. Her comments about the original 1937 film being outdated, particularly regarding the prince's role, ignited debates online. Some applauded her modern take, others accused her of disrespecting a classic. The discourse intensified, intertwining with discussions about representation and the evolving nature of storytelling. Gal Gadot's transformation into the Evil Queen was no small feat. The process of applying the old crone makeup took 4 hours each day. Gadot embraced the role, relishing the opportunity to play a character so different from her previous ones. She described the experience as delightful, finding joy in exploring the Queen's complexities. The film's musical elements added another layer of intrigue. Benj Pasek and Justin Paul, known for their work on La La Land and The Greatest Showman, composed original songs for the movie. Their involvement promised a fresh auditory experience, blending classic melodies with contemporary flair. Behind the scenes, the production faced delays due to the COVID-19 pandemic. Filming, initially set to begin in March 2020, was postponed to July 2020, and eventually took place in the United Kingdom from March to July 2022. The pandemic's impact was felt throughout the industry, and this film was no exception. In an unexpected twist, the film's storybook, seen in the opening sequence, was written in French. A nod, perhaps, to the tale's European roots and its widespread popularity in France, despite originating from German folklore. The casting of Martin Klebba as Grumpy marked his third portrayal of a dwarf character in a Snow White adaptation. Previously, he played Friday in Snow White, the Fairest of Them All, and Butcher in Mirror Mirror. His return to the story added a layer of continuity and homage to past interpretations. As the film neared completion, Disney ordered reshoots in June 2024. The original ending was altered, introducing a new scene involving the Evil Queen and the Magic Mirror. Additionally, a song titled Hidden in My Heart, described as a second-act tearjerker, was cut from the final version. The film's release was met with mixed reactions. The teaser trailer, released on YouTube, became one of the most disliked trailers on the platform, reflecting the polarized opinions surrounding the remake. Yet, amidst the controversies and challenges, the film stood as a testament to the complexities of reimagining a beloved classic for a modern audience. In the end, the journey of this adaptation was as multifaceted as the tale itself, a blend of tradition and innovation, reverence and reinvention. A story not just retold, but re-experienced through the lens of contemporary sensibilities. It's easy to forget, when the lights dim and the screen flickers to life, that a fairy tale doesn't just belong to its characters, it belongs to the world watching them. Every raised eyebrow, every sharp intake of breath, every tear slipping silently down a cheek becomes part of that story's legacy. And so, while this new vision of an age-old tale may have entered theaters cloaked in nostalgia and spectacle, it left with something far more complicated in its wake. Conversation, division, catharsis. There's a reason certain stories refuse to die. They echo, mutate, evolve. And when this one returned, reborn and restructured, it arrived not as a mirror of what came before but as a challenge to it. That, perhaps, was its boldest move, one that critics, audiences, and cultural commentators didn't all agree on. But they all felt it. Every scene hummed with the tension of expectation and reinvention. It didn't whisper its changes. It dared them. The first moments set the tone. Gone was the sing-song warmth of woodland creatures and gentle whimsy. The palace, with its cold symmetry and gleaming floors, was not the cradle of safety but a museum of control. The Queen's reign began not in madness, but in restraint. Critics noted how the absence of overt villainy in her opening scenes made her eventual descent all the more unsettling. She was poised, articulate, even sympathetic, until she wasn't. And that choice reverberated. This wasn't a queen who melted into evil like wax to flame. This was a queen who clawed her way into it with calculated purpose. One reviewer called her a villain of silence, not screams. And that silence lingered. Her pain wasn't cartoonish. It was societal. The film gave her room to breathe, to bleed, to unravel, and in doing so, dared the audience to pity her before they feared her. A risky choice, but one that anchored the film's emotional complexity. The mirror, once a tool for exposition, became something more unsettling, a silent witness. Never speaking aloud, its answers came through atmosphere. Shifts in tone. A flicker of light. A hum beneath the score. Critics debated this choice. Some called it masterful minimalism. Others argued it left too much unsaid. But no one denied its impact. The absence of a voice gave space for interpretation, and in that space, the film found tension. Then there was the girl. She didn't float. She didn't sing to birds. She didn't stumble into heroism. She saw too much, knew too much, and moved through the story not with wonder, but with weary awareness. Her character sparked the most debate. Critics split sharply. Was she cold? Was she empowered? Was she allowed to feel joy, or only endure? Those who praised her saw her as a modern archetype, a woman refusing to be soft simply because the world wanted her to be. They saw strength in her silences, choices in her restraint. But others longed for lightness, for levity, for a moment where her smile wasn't just a mask. The film offered little of that, and for some, that was its brilliance. For others, its flaw. Yet the pivotal scenes, the ones that carved themselves into critical memory, united even divided opinions. The apple scene, stripped of melodrama, unfolded like a dream corrupted. No music, no dialogue, just breath, just the bite. The camera lingered not on the apple, but on her eyes as they closed, on the slow collapse of her body to the forest floor. One critic wrote, "She didn't fall like a damsel. She fell like a tree cut from its roots." The forest reacted, falling silent, light dimming. Even the birds stopped. A death not of body, but of belief. And in that silence, the film did something many didn't expect. It paused. Truly paused. A full minute passed without movement. Audiences fidgeted. Some called it indulgent. Others called it necessary. It was grief, uninterrupted. When she wakes, it is not by kiss, not by fate, but by voice, by someone remembering her before the world forgot. A new interpretation, yes. One that drew fire and praise alike. Some argued it weakened the magic. Others saw it as reclaiming it. The idea that memory could revive, that connection could bridge death, that was the story's quiet revelation. It wasn't just a woman brought back to life. It was a belief in being seen that resurrected her. The final act divided more than any other. She returns not to take revenge, not to punish, but to confront. The Queen, now shattered in her own reflection, isn't defeated by force. She isn't even truly fought. She's faced. And that distinction sparked endless analysis. Critics wrestled with the anticlimax. Some called it brave. Others called it a missed opportunity. But all agreed it refused to follow the script. This wasn't a battle. It was a reckoning. The girl stood not as a warrior, but as a mirror to the Queen. And in doing so, revealed the heart of the film. A story about how the world teaches women to measure worth in mirrors, and what it costs when they do. The film didn't end in triumph. It ended in choice. She left the palace, left the crown, planted a seed instead. That choice, more than any other, became the film's final argument. That legacy is not claimed in stone, but in soil. Not in thrones, but in footsteps. Not in how loudly a woman rules, but how deeply she roots herself in truth. That moment was celebrated by some, critiqued by others. But even those who rejected it couldn't deny its resonance. It lingered. Quietly. Uncomfortably. Some critics saw it as feminist reclamation. Others saw it as revisionism. A few accused the film of abandoning magic for metaphor. But the strongest voices recognized the nuance. One reviewer wrote, "She wasn't trying to rewrite the fairy tale. She was trying to wake it up." Audiences reflected that complexity. Online forums lit up with personal stories. Women spoke of how the Queen reminded them of their mothers, their fears, their mirrors. Others shared that the girl's journey mirrored their own, choosing silence, survival, small rebellions. Some said they cried not during the big moments, but the quiet ones, when she braided her hair alone, when she stood in the woods and finally let herself scream. The reception was far from unanimous. Some wanted more magic, more romance, more color. Others praised the restraint, the shadows, the honesty. But in every review, positive or not, there was engagement. The film didn't entertain and vanish. It haunted, provoked, demanded reflection. And in that way it succeeded. Because it made a familiar story unfamiliar again. It forced a reckoning, not just between characters, but between story and society. Between the tale we were told as children and the one we now tell ourselves. The film didn't just adapt a fairy tale. It interrogated it. Who decides what is beautiful? Who decides what is heroic? Who gets to wake up? And who gets to walk away? In the end, the film answered not with absolutes, but with invitation. To watch, to feel, to question, and maybe to plant something new. It started, as many stories do, with the best of intentions, and a sudden fire. Before a single frame had been captured, before the actors even stepped into costume, a blaze curled its way across the set under construction at Pinewood Studios. The forest, the film's most sacred and symbolic landscape, was the first to burn. Not in metaphor, but in flame. A tree, meticulously sculpted to appear ancient and wild, caught fire and set off a chain reaction that halted all progress for days. Production hadn't officially begun. No cameras rolled. No actors rehearsed. And yet the film already carried the scent of smoke and struggle into its creation. It was the first of many disruptions. The film's development had long simmered behind closed doors, as executives debated how to revive a tale so iconic, so visually imprinted in the global imagination. This would not be a straightforward retelling. It couldn't be. The world had changed. The expectations were different. A kingdom once drawn in delicate lines and watercolor pastels would now need depth, realism, and relevance. At the center of this reinvention was a girl cast not only to embody a classic, but to reshape it. When she was announced, the world watched. Whispers quickly turned into headlines. She was young. She was bold. She had opinions, and she didn't hide them. In interviews, she called the original tale a snapshot of its time. She questioned the role of the prince. She spoke not just about dresses and castles, but about agency, independence, identity. And in doing so, she became part of the film's narrative long before it hit screens. The studio stood by her. But not everyone did. Online forums erupted. Comment threads became battlegrounds. Fans of the classic clashed with advocates for change. It was no longer just about a film. It was about what stories mean, who gets to tell them, and whether beloved myths can, or should, be rewritten. And then there were the dwarfs. Or rather, the absence of them. In an effort to avoid stereotypes, the studio announced it would reimagine the Seven Companions using CGI-enhanced characters, leaning into their magical creature status. The backlash was immediate. High-profile actors within the dwarfism community called out the move, arguing that a rare opportunity for representation was being erased in favor of abstraction. The debate wasn't just about casting. It was about visibility, identity, dignity. The echoes of that decision rang through every article, every interview, every behind-the-scenes glimpse. Still, the crew moved forward. They built the world piece by piece, beginning with the palace. The art department crafted a set that was not just grand, but heavy with history. Every archway, every chandelier, every mirror was placed with purpose. The throne room was redesigned to reflect not majesty, but obsession. The walls gleamed like glass, smooth, spotless, hollow. The mirrors did not simply reflect. They distorted. A nod to the Queen's warped self-perception. No detail was accidental. Gal Gadot, cast as the Queen, threw herself into the role with striking intensity. Her transformation was legendary on set. Each day, she sat for hours while prosthetics aged her into the crone, wiry white hair, hooked nose, sunken eyes. The process was exhaustive. She described it as meditative. And when she emerged from makeup, the entire mood on set shifted. Her voice dropped, her posture bent, her eyes sharpened with something otherworldly. Crew members later admitted to giving her space, not out of fear, but reverence. And yet, between takes, she would laugh, make jokes, sneak snacks under the veil of her cloak. Duality became her performance's hallmark, regality and decay living side by side. Music became another cornerstone of the film's identity. With two of the most acclaimed songwriters in contemporary film brought on board, expectations were high. The melodies they composed were rich with layered meaning. Some carried echoes of the original film, chords that hinted at lullabies and longing, but with a modern edge. The songs were designed to reveal character, not just mood. One ballad, meant for the protagonist, was written and rewritten 10 times before the perfect version emerged. It was later removed during reshoots, a decision that devastated many on the creative team. The score itself leaned heavily into duality, lush strings wrapped around eerie electronic undertones. The forest had its own sound, composed entirely of organic instruments recorded in live sessions with ambient noise from actual woods folded in. In post-production, birdsong, creaking branches, and human breaths were manipulated into rhythmic loops. The soundscape breathed. Filming resumed in fits and starts. Pandemic protocols lingered. Masks covered every face not on camera. Actors rehearsed at distances. Entire days were lost to testing, tracing, and readjusting. But there was a strange intimacy in it too. The isolation bonded the cast. They shared meals in silence. They whispered through scripts together. The forest, once rebuilt, became not just a set, but a sanctuary. Rachel Zegler, inhabiting the role of the girl, committed herself wholly to the emotional arc. She didn't want to mimic innocence. She wanted to trace how a young woman carved clarity out of captivity. Her performances were quiet, grounded. She rarely rehearsed lines the same way twice. Directors gave her room to explore. In one unplanned moment, she broke down after a difficult scene, not because she forgot her lines, but because she felt the story's weight pressing against her chest. That take made the final cut. The Queen's chamber was lit with cold whites and silvers. The girl's sanctuary, a cottage grown from forest stone and moss, was lit entirely with natural light and flame. Candles, windows, fire. No artificial glow. The contrast was visual poetry. Props told their own stories. The poisoned apple was hand-carved from resin, painted with layers of lacquer and pigment to create an unnatural sheen. On set, it was referred to as the star by the crew. Everyone was warned not to touch it. It sat under glass, guarded like a relic. The book that opens the film, a nod to the original animated version, was crafted by French artisans and written in old cursive script. The pages were filled with more than the script required: drawings, handwritten notes, scraps of invented folklore. It was a prop no one would ever read on camera, but it was built to exist. As post-production loomed, executives asked for changes. They wanted a different ending. More closure. More spectacle. Reshoots were ordered. A new final scene was written where the Queen, now banished to her mirror realm, stares endlessly into herself, a poetic punishment, haunting and unresolved. But something was lost in those changes. The original final song, a tender piece about remembrance and rebirth, was cut. It had been performed live on set, with the entire cast watching. Some wept during the recording. Its absence in the final film was felt, not only by those who made it, but by those who watched and sensed that something beautiful had been left behind. Marketing approached the release with caution. Teasers were abstract. Posters favored silhouettes and shadows. No one wanted to promise a fairy tale. They wanted to promise a journey. And when the trailer dropped, the internet roared. Some were enchanted. Others were enraged. Accusations of betrayal flew alongside praise for bravery. Comment sections burned. The film hadn't premiered, but the world had already decided what it would be. And then, finally, it opened. Audiences filed in with expectation burning in their chests. And they left, changed. Some were disappointed. It wasn't the fairy tale they knew. But others saw something else. Not a perfect story, but a reckoning. Of myth, of mirror, of memory. And in the hush of those final frames, as the girl walked away from the throne, from the mirror, from the tale that tried to define her, something remarkable happened. The fairy tale grew up. It begins with stone. Cold. Towering. Immaculate. The castle looms over the land like a judgment carved in granite. It's not built for comfort, it's built for control. Everything about it feels deliberately distant. The way the ceilings stretch too high to see, the way footsteps vanish into vast halls of polished echo. It is not a place meant to be lived in, but one meant to be looked at. A museum of beauty, curated by fear. Every inch of it tells the Queen's story before she ever speaks. Her obsession with perfection bleeds into the design. Walls lined with glistening mirrors that shimmer with silent menace, corridors that lead nowhere but loop back on themselves like the spiral of her own vanity. Windows are narrow, casting sharp stripes of light like prison bars. The air is always still, as if the palace is holding its breath, afraid to offend. There are no soft colors here. Only silver, obsidian, the occasional flicker of blood red, rich velvet curtains drawn tight like secrets. Even the thrones are sharp-edged, not thrones at all, really, but pedestals. And it is here, in this bone-white sanctum of symmetry, that the story begins its descent. The castle is designed to reflect, not warmth, but power. And that power isolates. The queen walks through it like a ghost in a chapel she built herself, her presence mirrored endlessly back at her from every surface. But in the stillness of those walls lies a truth she cannot silence. Nothing reflects forever. And then there is the forest. The moment the girl flees into the trees, everything changes. The world uncoils. The air thickens. The light breathes. This forest is not a painted backdrop. It is alive. Wild in its geometry. Tangled with secrets. The trunks are wide, knotted like clenched fists. Moss spills over fallen logs. Roots twist through the soil like veins. Here, nothing is symmetrical. The trees bend where they please. Light seeps in wherever it dares. The camera loses its polish, the lens fogs with breath. It shakes. It runs. It stumbles behind the girl as she falls into this untamed place, and we fall with her. This contrast is no accident. The forest doesn't just represent freedom, it embodies it. It breaks the rules the castle enforces. Where the palace is lit by candles and chandeliers, the forest glows in patches, sun filtering down in golden slices through a living ceiling of leaves. Dust floats in the air like magic unformed. Every frame pulses with motion. Even in stillness, a branch creaks, a leaf flutters, a shadow shifts. The cinematography here tells a different story. Gone are the rigid compositions and static frames. The camera dances. It crouches low, then lifts skyward with a bird's flight. It peers through cracks, follows footprints, drinks in water droplets balanced on blades of grass. Where the palace was sterile, this world is sensual. It feels. But the forest is not only beauty, it is trial. Paths vanish. Landmarks deceive. Nothing is handed to the girl, not even shelter. She must find it. She must earn it. And so, a new setting emerges, the cottage. Hidden in the fold of the woods, the cottage is unlike anything we've seen so far. It is not magnificent. It is human. Crooked walls patched with ivy, windows smeared with soot and memory. Inside, every object tells a story. A chipped mug. A wooden spoon worn smooth. Blankets that smell like smoke and time. The warmth is immediate and startling. For the first time, she exhales. It is here that the film slows. Let's light in. Let's the girl listen. The cinematography lingers in these moments. Close-ups of hands stirring soup, fingers threading through hair, candlelight flickering against the pages of a worn book. The color palette softens to warm ambers and muted greens. Scenes are held longer. Conversations stretch. Silences deepen. The atmosphere shifts from survival to sanctuary. Still, the queen's influence looms. Even far from the palace, the world bears her scars. The mirror's magic ripples outward. Birds fall silent. The sky bruises. The queen's castle, once pristine, begins to decay, subtly at first. A crack in a mirror. A curtain faded. But with each of the girl's steps toward truth, the queen's world unravels a little more. This unraveling is not dramatic. It is deliberate. The filmmakers use space to reflect collapse. Wide shots that isolate the queen in rooms that now feel too large, too empty. Her grandeur becomes her coffin. Visual cues deepen this sense of erosion. In one scene, the queen passes a hallway where the mirrors no longer reflect her at all. Instead, they show fog. In another, her reflection ripples even when she is still. The setting itself begins to reject her. The camera doesn't cut sharply away. It holds. It watches her unravel. Then the storm comes. Not just a shift in weather, but in theme. The girl returns. And with her, a change in tone. The castle she re-enters is not the same. The light is dimmer. The mirrors fractured. The grand staircase, once polished to perfection, is dusted in ash. The throne room's glass shimmers with hairline cracks. No one speaks of it, but everyone feels it. The kingdom is crumbling, not physically, but morally, emotionally. And the film doesn't rush to show this. It lets the setting speak. Even the throne itself becomes a character. Once a seat of fear, now it looks absurd, oversized, too tall, cold as tombstone. The queen sits on it not like a ruler, but like a relic. As the final confrontation nears, the use of space becomes tighter. Rooms that once felt vast now feel claustrophobic. Shadows deepen. The queen's silhouette fractures across the floor. The camera no longer respects her angles. It tilts, distorts. Mirrors shatter. And the sound design, silent for so long, begins to rise. Not with music, but with breath. With heartbeat. When the spell is broken, it is not with light but with emptiness. The queen's castle does not explode. It goes quiet. The final image of her throne, empty, unclaimed, is left unlit, unattended, forgotten. The girl doesn't stay. She walks, this time, not into the forest, but through it. And the world shifts again. The final setting, a meadow near the wood's edge, glows with untamed grace. The light here is warmer. The wind gentler. She does not return to the palace. She returns to the land. She kneels. Plants something. A seed. And in this act, the film whispers its final statement. That power is not in what we build for show, but in what we grow in silence. Even the credits reflect this philosophy. No sweeping overture. Just gentle strings. Scenes of nature. The forest breathing. Rainfall. The slow unfurling of a leaf. The setting, from beginning to end, is not background. It is narrative. It mirrors, mocks, protects, punishes. It wraps the characters in symbols, palace as prison, forest as forge, cottage as healing, meadow as rebirth. The film's cinematography doesn't merely capture it. It reveals it. It interprets. Each frame is painted with intention. Each shift in tone, in color, in angle is part of the story's emotional tide. Because in this tale, the world isn't just where the story happens. It is the story. It begins with a mirror. Not just a polished surface reflecting a face, but an idea, a prison, a question. Who is the fairest of them all? The line is familiar. Iconic. But in this retelling, it is something darker, something colder. It's not a question asked for praise, it's a plea whispered into silence. The queen doesn't look into the mirror for affirmation. She stares into it out of fear. What if she is no longer enough? This is where the film plants its deepest root, the theme of identity defined by external perception. Beauty, here, is currency. Control. A weapon used to maintain order and dominance. The queen, radiant and precise, rules not by force but by image. Her power comes not from her hands but from her reflection, and that is the very heart of her tragedy. The mirror is more than an object. It is a symbol of obsession, of dependency, of the societal demand that women remain eternally youthful, eternally admired. In its cold gleam, we see not only the queen's unraveling, but a culture's, one that worships appearance while it erases substance. She is terrified of being replaced, not because she fears death, but because she fears fading. Opposite her stands the girl, Snow White not in name alone, but in contradiction. A girl who is not sculpted or rehearsed, not graceful in the ways the court demands, but present. Her beauty is not adorned, not painted, not mirrored. It simply is. And that is what makes her so dangerous. She exists outside the queen's system. She doesn't ask to be seen. She doesn't perform. And in doing so, she exposes the hollowness of the queen's throne. Their conflict is not simply one of good and evil. It is a war of meaning. The queen sees herself as the curator of perfection. The girl, meanwhile, becomes its antidote, not through rebellion, but through refusal. She does not challenge the queen by shouting. She does not match her grandeur. She walks away from it. Again and again, she chooses the path that leads not to applause, but to freedom. And in those choices, the film crafts its next major theme: self-liberation. The poisoned apple becomes the fulcrum of these ideas. Not just a device for betrayal, but a symbol of temptation. The girl is offered peace, sleep, a way out. The apple is red, not in a natural way, but in the way of something artificial. It glistens too perfectly. Its promise is too clean. And when she takes a bite, it is not weakness. It is sacrifice. She accepts the illusion so others may wake from it. In that act, the film reframes passivity. Her sleep is not her downfall. It is her gift. When she wakes, it is not from a kiss. It is from remembrance. From someone seeing her, truly seeing her, not as an idea, not as a figure in glass, but as a person. This moment becomes the culmination of the film's quiet insistence that connection, not beauty, not power, is what gives life meaning. The forest, wild and unforgiving, becomes her crucible, a place of transformation, of unlearning. The palace is control. The forest is chaos. But in that chaos there is truth. The film uses the forest as a space of internal reckoning. The camera pulls close. Light filters through leaves like secrets. Everything breathes. In this setting, stripped of mirrors, stripped of expectation, the girl begins to hear herself. And then there is the queen's descent. The film does not make her monstrous. It makes her recognizable. Her madness isn't sudden. It is slow, symphonic, built from the daily erosion of self-worth. Her need for control deepens as the mirror fades. She tries new spells, more mirrors, more questions, but none of them return the answer she craves, because it was never about truth. It was about assurance. And the mirror, finally, stops lying. She crumbles not because she is defeated, but because she is abandoned, first by the world, then by the very image she worshipped. Her death, when it comes, is not brutal. It is quiet, a whisper swallowed by stone. She is not slain by a hero. She collapses under the weight of the illusion she built. And in her end lies the film's final message, that power built on fear and vanity cannot endure. That to be seen only as beautiful is to be forever haunted by the moment you're no longer deemed so. But the film doesn't end in grief. It ends in growth. The girl, now awake, does not claim the throne. She walks away, not into exile, but into beginning. She plants something, a seed, small, unassuming, yet alive. That act, a hand in the dirt, is the film's truest answer to the mirror's question. Not who is the fairest, but what will you leave behind? Throughout, the filmmakers layer symbolism into every frame. Costumes shift with character arcs. The queen's gowns become more constrictive, more metallic, as her desperation grows. The girl's clothing, once formal and heavy, gives way to flowing linen and open sleeves, freedom woven into fabric. Mirrors appear everywhere, not just as glass, but in puddles, in eyes, in gestures. And over time, reflections become distorted. Even the queen's own face, once flawless, begins to blur. Cinematography mirrors emotional states, shaky handheld shots during moments of fear, wide still frames when the girl finally finds peace. And color, oh the color! The palace is cast in silvers and blues. Cold, unfeeling. The forest bursts with green and gold, hues of rebirth. The apple's red becomes the dividing line, the only color shared by both queen and girl, both poison and choice. Music ties it all together. The queen's themes are built on descending notes, minor keys. instruments that stretch and snap like nerves. The girls' melodies rise slowly, not triumphant, patient, earned. Together, these elements weave a story that asks, what do we inherit when we chase perfection? And what do we become when we let it go? In the end, the queen is not remembered. The girl is not worshipped. But the garden she plants, one that grows wild, without mirrors, remains. And that, the film whispers, is the only legacy worth leaving. It began with a whisper, a hush that settled over the set as the first camera rolled. Not because of nerves, but reverence. This was not just another film. It was a reimagining of a tale as old as time, brought to life with the tools and techniques of modern cinema. The director, known for his meticulous attention to detail, approached the project with a vision that blended the classic with the contemporary. He sought to create a world that felt both timeless and immediate, where every frame was a painting, every movement choreographed to perfection. Cinematography played a pivotal role in shaping the film's atmosphere. The director of photography employed a palette that shifted with the narrative's emotional beats. In the Queen's castle, cold blues and grays dominated, casting a sterile, oppressive mood. The lighting was sharp, shadows deep, emphasizing the character's isolation and obsession. Conversely, the forest scenes were bathed in warm, golden hues, with soft lighting that filtered through the trees, creating a sense of magic and wonder. The camera movements here were fluid, often handheld, giving a sense of intimacy and immediacy. This contrast between the rigid, controlled environment of the castle and the organic, free-flowing forest underscored the film's central themes of freedom versus control. Sound design further enhanced the viewer's experience. In the castle, the soundscape was minimalistic, with echoes emphasizing the emptiness of the space. The Queen's footsteps resonated ominously, and the ticking of clocks served as a constant reminder of time's passage and her fading beauty. In contrast, the forest was alive with sound. Birdsong, rustling leaves, and the babbling of brooks created an immersive environment. The use of diegetic sound here made the forest feel real and vibrant, a character in its own right. Editing choices were deliberate and purposeful. The pacing in the castle scenes was slow and methodical, mirroring the Queen's calculated nature. Long takes and static shots conveyed a sense of entrapment. Meanwhile, the forest sequences featured quicker cuts and dynamic camera angles, reflecting the protagonist's journey of discovery and the unpredictability of the natural world. Visual effects were employed judiciously, enhancing rather than overwhelming the narrative. The magic mirror, for instance, was brought to life with subtle CGI, its surface rippling like water as it spoke, creating an ethereal, otherworldly presence. The transformation sequences, particularly the Queen's descent into the Old Crone, were achieved through a blend of practical makeup and digital enhancements, ensuring a seamless and believable metamorphosis. The film's musical score was another cornerstone of its emotional resonance. Composed by a renowned duo known for their work on contemporary musicals, the songs were woven organically into the narrative. Each piece reflected the inner world of the characters, from the Queen's haunting laments to the protagonist's hopeful ballads. The orchestration combined traditional instruments with modern arrangements, creating a sound that was both nostalgic and fresh. Despite the artistic achievements, the film faced challenges at the box office. With a production budget estimated between $240 million and $270 million, and additional marketing costs pushing the total expenditure higher, the film needed to perform exceptionally to break even. However, it grossed approximately $200 million worldwide, falling short of expectations. Factors contributing to this underperformance included controversies surrounding casting choices and public statements by the lead actress, which sparked debates and boycotts. Nevertheless, the film stands as a testament to the power of storytelling and the capabilities of modern filmmaking. Through its use of cinematography, sound design, editing, and visual effects, it breathed new life into a classic tale, offering audiences a visually stunning and emotionally resonant experience. In the end, while the numbers may not have met projections, the film's artistic merits and the dedication of its cast and crew ensured that this reimagined fairy tale left an indelible mark on the landscape of contemporary cinema. The forest was no longer still. The wind carried a new kind of hush, one that didn't fear silence, but revered it. And somewhere beneath the canopy, where roots twisted like time itself and flowers bloomed with colors that felt more vivid than they had any right to, a story came to its final breath. Snow White, the girl who had once been defined by her fragility and innocence, now stood as something far more complex. Not just a symbol of purity, not merely a beacon of goodness, but a woman forged in shadow and fire. And in this 2025 reimagining, the age-old fairy tale we thought we knew revealed layers that had been hidden beneath centuries of glossed-over storytelling. Here, we watched the myth unravel and reform into something both haunting and deeply human. From the very beginning, this was never about the poisoned apple. It wasn't even about the evil queen. This was a reckoning, a confrontation with the self, the mirror, and all the fractured versions of identity that live within it. We began with a kingdom caught in the grip of illusion, a monarch obsessed not with beauty alone, but with the power it bestowed. Queen Ravenna, no longer a caricature of vanity, was reinterpreted as a tragic figure, wounded, desperate, haunted by the ghosts of her own past. Her reign was one not of superficial evil, but of calculated fear and aching loneliness. She didn't just want Snow White dead, she wanted to destroy the innocence she herself had once been denied. But Snow White was not so easily shattered. In the film's early movements, we watched her flee, not out of cowardice, but as a child thrust too soon into the wilderness of adulthood. Her escape into the forest wasn't just physical. It was symbolic. A passage through trauma. A descent into the mythic unknown where she would come to face not only the beasts that lurked without, but those that whispered within. And the forest, the film's most mesmerizing character in its own right, became the crucible. Trees that bent as if bowing to her pain, creatures that shimmered with secrets older than any kingdom. It was there, in that enchanted nowhere, that Snow White discovered something raw and real. The dwarves, too, reimagined not as comic relief but as guardians of forgotten truths, offered her more than protection. They offered her understanding. Each one, a fragment of wisdom, carried scars from battles she hadn't yet learned to name. What followed was not a simple hero's journey. Snow White didn't just train or rally armies. She mourned. She questioned. She raged. And through that emotional honesty, she found a kind of power the queen could never touch. The confrontation that came, icy, operatic, and brutal, was less about who would win and more about what it meant to survive. The castle felt like a cathedral of memory, each stone echoing with betrayals and half-forgotten lullabies. When Snow White and Ravenna finally stood across from each other, it wasn't a battle between good and evil. It was two women, two versions of what power could be, meeting in the middle of their pain. Ravenna, even in her demise, did not scream. She did not beg. Her eyes, cold and shimmering, held a strange kind of release. As if she had known all along that this was the only way her story could end, not with a crown, but with surrender. A mirror cracked beyond repair. And Snow White, standing over her, didn't rejoice. She didn't claim triumph. She simply breathed. The war was over. But the healing, you could tell, was only beginning. The coronation that followed was not gilded with triumph. It was intimate, quiet. Her crown wasn't placed on her head with fanfare, but with reverence. She had become queen not by lineage, but by choice. A choice to lead with compassion, not fear. To create a world where girls were not hunted for their beauty. Where power didn't come from mirrors, but from the truth reflected in others. And yet, even as peace settled over the kingdom like snowfall, the film didn't let us forget. There were no guarantees. No perfect endings. The final scenes, suffused in golden dusk, reminded us that even fairy tales are stitched with sorrow. That the forest still remembers. That the mirror's shards remain buried, waiting to be found again. Because that's what Snow White, 2025, ultimately dared to say, that stories are not static. That even the most familiar legends can hold new truths when told through a different lens. This version stripped away the moral absolutes, the cardboard villains, and the easy heroism. It gave us characters who felt like echoes of ourselves, conflicted, yearning, afraid, but always reaching. It begins in silence. Not the kind of silence that feels empty, but the kind that feels full, like something ancient is waiting just beyond the horizon. In the stillness, there's a hush that seems to hold its breath, as though the world itself knows that something sacred is about to unfold. A story, perhaps, but not the one you remember. Not the tale whispered through generations like a bedtime hymn. This one is different. Sharper, darker, and far more alive. From the moment it begins, you sense the shift. The opening frames are steeped in atmosphere, a kingdom wrapped in soft gray light, where opulence and sorrow walk hand in hand. You don't hear birdsong or laughter. You hear the rustling of cloaks, the echo of empty halls, and the haunting hum of something wrong beneath the surface. There's a weight in the air, as if the castle's walls remember every secret they were built to hide. At its center stands a young girl, orphaned by circumstance and fate, caught between the memory of her mother's kindness and the cruel elegance of the woman who now wears the crown. But this girl isn't naive. Even in youth, she watches the world with a kind of quiet intensity. Her name is barely spoken in the early minutes, because names have power, and her story has not yet begun. It is the queen who speaks, who commands, who consumes every frame with a presence as captivating as it is unsettling. She is not wicked in the way fairy tales used to tell us. She is cold, yes. Vain, perhaps. But more than that, she is haunted. The mirror she turns to day after day does not simply reflect her beauty, it reflects her fear. Her fear of fading, of losing control, of becoming invisible in a world that only worships youth and power. The mirror, in this retelling, is no passive object. It is a character, a confessional, a curse. And so the tale unwinds, thread by thread, into a tapestry that feels both familiar and wholly unrecognizable. The escape into the forest is where everything changes. It's where the myth dissolves into metaphor, where the fairy tale splinters into something far more human. The forest is not just a place of danger, it is a world untouched by the laws of man, where time moves differently, and where the wounded go to hide. Here, trees seem to lean in close, listening. The ground feels sacred. The animals are strange, almost divine, and everything breathes with the pulse of something older than the kingdom itself. The girl who runs into these woods does not find immediate comfort. What she finds is wildness, chaos, and reflection. She sees parts of herself in the twisted roots and thorn-covered paths. She bleeds. She cries. But she also begins to remember who she was before fear took hold. The companions she meets, once cartoonish figures turned into symbols of earthy resilience, are no longer there for comic relief. They are survivors, exiles, fragments of a world that once was, clinging to what little hope remains. Each of them offers a different lesson, in grief, in loyalty, in resistance. And through them, the girl learns not how to fight, but why. Her transformation is not sudden. It is slow, painful, and real. She does not become a warrior overnight. She becomes something more powerful, a witness to her own pain and a vessel for change. She doesn't seek revenge. She seeks restoration. Of herself, of her people, of a kingdom that has long since lost its heart. But what makes this story linger isn't just its reinvention of old roles. It's how it chooses to blur them. The queen, for all her cruelty, is never reduced to a one-note villain. Her backstory, revealed not through exposition but through glances, gestures, and the things she doesn't say, paints a portrait of someone broken long before she ever wore the crown. There is sadness in her beauty, a desperate need to control the world because she never truly felt safe in it. She is terrifying, yes, but also terribly alone. And in their final confrontation, there is no glee. No triumphant cry. Just sorrow. Just the heavy silence of two women standing in the ruins of everything that made them who they are. One who could not let go of the past, and one who dared to imagine a future. Visually, the film is a painting in motion. Every frame composed with intention. The castle, once golden and alive, now sits like a mausoleum of memory. The forest pulses with color and shadow, as if it's breathing alongside the characters. The use of light is particularly haunting. Soft candle glows in moments of vulnerability, stark white sunlight in scenes of revelation, and deep, enveloping darkness when the truth becomes too much to bear. The sound design is equally meticulous. The creak of a floorboard, the whisper of wind through leaves, the distant echo of a forgotten song. Each moment is scored with restraint, letting silence speak when words fall short. And when the music does rise, it does so like a tide, swelling with emotion, not to manipulate the audience, but to carry them further into the soul of the story. Even the famous motifs, apples, mirrors, the kiss, are reinvented with aching subtlety. The apple, no longer a garish red temptation, is something far more insidious. It is crafted from desperation, coated in magic that feels more like science, and offered not with a wicked smile, but a weary one. When it's bitten, the moment is not dramatized. It's quiet, almost tragic, like watching someone slip beneath the water without a splash. And the mirror, how it lingers, how it watches. In this telling, it does not speak in riddles or rhymes. It reflects, only reflects. And yet, that reflection is more damning than any prophecy. Because in its glass, the queen sees not Snow White, not a rival, but the girl she used to be. The one who was afraid. The one who was hurt. The one she tried to kill within herself long before she tried to kill anyone else. As for the prince, he exists. But not in the way you expect. He is kind, yes. Noble. But he does not save her. He waits. He listens. And when the moment comes, he doesn't try to take her hand and lead her away. He simply stands beside her, silent and steady, as she chooses her own path forward. His love is not a reward. It is a quiet offering, one she may or may not accept. And that ambiguity is part of what makes it so honest. By the time the film reaches its final scene, you feel changed. Not because you were told what to feel, but because it allowed you to feel. It gave you space. It gave you silence. And in that silence, it gave you truth. There is no grand celebration. No sweeping camera pullback with swelling music. There is a sunrise. A quiet one. The kind that slips slowly over the mountains and warms the cold stones of a long-abandoned throne room. A soft wind blows through cracked windows. The girl, no longer a girl, stands at the edge of something new. She is not smiling. But there is peace in her face. And strength. Because she knows now that power is not in beauty, or strength, or even love. Power is in choice. And she has chosen. What this film accomplishes, above all else, is a kind of reawakening. It asks us to reconsider the stories we've inherited, to look deeper, to understand that the lines between villain and victim, queen and prisoner, savior and survivor, are often thinner than we think. It challenges the assumption that fairy tales are for children, because what it tells us, softly but firmly, is that the most enduring stories are the ones that help us navigate the darkness, not avoid it.